at our media launch, which is going to detail the idea behind the Youth Day Parade for Justice and Change for Young People. We'd like to welcome you to the memorial, and just housekeeping rules. The bathrooms are just outside on your left-hand side. You go all the way straight down. You should be able to find them. And the speakers today are just a snapshot of the organizations that have endorsed the concept, as well as, I think, who Mr. Mandla Nkomfe, who is the Deputy Chairperson at the Katrana Foundation, and he also has his own activism experience, and I'm not sure if he's going to be touching base on that, but he'll also just be sharing his own endorsement into this new innovative idea of how young people are reclaiming the legacy of June 16 and how they want to highlight their own issues and how they think that those in power should be able to respond. And then there's also Umam Antoinette Sitole, who is the sister of Hector Peterson, and then she will also be lending in her own support. And then I think the rest of the speakers, yes, once again, will be able to speak and share their own short messages of endorsement. And I think the wonderful thing about these organizations is that they represent different sectors, whether it's the climate issues, whether it's issues around gender-based violence, and these are just all the issues that are affecting young people who are the future, and young people who will still have to live and face most of these problems. So if you don't find the solutions now, then yeah, it's quite bleak. But it's good to see that young people, they are not stagnant. Young people are taking a stand, and we look forward to having them joining us on the 16th of June, and not just young people only, whether it's young, old, and different organizations and so forth, banding and coming together. So that is it from my side. I will hand over to Irfan, who is the Youth Programs Manager at the Katrana Foundation, and he will detail to us what exactly will we, and hopefully a lot of you here and more, will be doing on the 16th of June.
Thank you so much, Delani. Friends, colleagues, fellow youth, and all justice-loving people, I greet you all in the name of love, justice, peace, and solidarity. Today we gathered at the Hector Peterson Memorial Museum in Soweto, where thousands of young people organized and mobilized against systemic injustice. This action taken by the youth of 1976 spread countrywide and had a profound impact on the socio-political landscape of South Africa. We are grateful and honored that Mam Antoinette Sitole is here with us today to deliver a message of solidarity to the youth of the present day, in the hope that it inspires us to take action in our communities. Also with us is the esteemed leader, Mr. Mandla Nkomfe, who led students and youth during the 1980s. And as you know, there was a time in which the struggle against injustice continued while many other leaders were on Robben Island and in exile. He bears the hat of the Deputy Chairperson of the Katrana Foundation and will also deliver a message in that regard. My contribution today is simple: to explain why we are here, what purpose does this Youth Day Parade for Justice and Change serve, and how this will be conducted. The Youth Day Parade for Justice and Change serves as an important unifying platform where to date, over 77 organizations from grassroots movements, advocacy groups, religious and relief organizations, human rights, and other civil society bodies came together or are coming together to amplify the voices of youth, to demand a more just, fair, and equitable system. It is our hope that this parade inspires the youth from all across the country, and not just in Gauteng, to begin the work in solidarity with one another, to tackle the grave issues we are faced with, because for far too long, we have limited our actions in small doses. But today, we want to inspire the spirit of collectivism once more, in order to strengthen the democratic system that we are inheriting. While every year, we rightfully relieve in memory of the young people who lost their lives for our freedom, we believe more can be done to honor their legacy. Hence, the Parade for Justice and Change will serve as a call to action for those youth who are angry, frustrated, and annoyed at the failures of the system we are governed by, and to pull up our sleeves and continue the hard and long journey of committed service to our people, to ensure that all lives are respected and that young people have sustainable jobs and are able to live safely in their communities. And that we as a collective do all in our power to act beyond the social media streets, to demand a more responsive and caring government. At the heart of this is for us to honor the lives lost by committing our own lives to the new struggles that we are faced with. That is of youth unemployment, climate change, poverty, and deepening inequality. Acts of solidarity must always be encouraged and supported. Therefore, we are also calling on business and thought leaders who believe in young people legitimately and robustly taking up the mantle of leadership to support this initiative through financial contributions in support of and by just showing up in their numbers on the day. This is a youth-led initiative, but it's a call out to the broader South African public. Just like Uncle Sonny Morgan, the solar guy, who, for example, as this initiative was taking off, said he is committed with the Katrana youth to train 1,000 young people in solar energy installation. These kind of soft skills development tackle the unemployment issue, empower young people with new skills, and help in the alleviation of poverty and unemployment. The current status quo is unsustainable, and we need new, innovative, and drastic changes. This must be coupled with change in our political culture, away from violence and self-empowerment, because gone are the days when young people will just be used as tokens. 1/3 of this population are considered to be youth. That is close to 21 million and above, and it continues to grow. Young people continue to bear the brunt of years of unemployment, and COVID and now the war in Ukraine have just ensured that this continues to grow in the negative light. And when will it end? I may not have the answer to all of it, but I do have the starting point. And if anything, the example set by the youth of the 76 generation, the 80s generation, and as recent as the Fees Must Fall generation have shown us that when young people come together, the systems that govern us are forced to listen. On June 16th, as a collective of youth, we will conduct the Youth Day Parade for Justice and Change, starting at Loftus Versfeld Stadium, by where we will gather at 9 a.m. for 9:30 a.m. and proceed to the Union Building lawns, where we will hand over a memorandum to the presidency, which we've shared now with all our partner organizations for contributions. It is there where we will carry out a solidarity program with young artists, activists, and speakers. Today, we welcome in Youth Month in the spirit of hope and change and possibility. Just as the youth of Soweto didn't give up, just as the youth of Khayelitsha didn't give up, just as the youth of Alex, Tembisa, Orange Farm, Lenasia, Shoshanguve, the Cape Flats, and even in the disaster-stricken KZN don't give up, and every other community in this country that continues to push on in resilience and in unity, trying to push on despite the difficult circumstances, we too cannot give up now. Let us mark Youth Day this year as a turning point for us to continue the work to bring about true justice and change. I thank you. I'm going to hand over now to Ma'am Antoinette Sitole as a youth from 1976 as a message of solidarity. Thank you, Ma'am Sitole, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Afternoon, my colleagues here on the table and the youth at large. The 16th of June is a day where we as youth took up the streets of Soweto fighting for education and human rights. By the way, we did not tell our parents. No wonder the demonstration was so successful. But we were also fighting for generations to come, like you before me. That means we opened the path, the doors that were shut for us not to enter, for you to get a better life, a better education, etc. Now that the path is open, actually, I'm expecting that the youth today, even though we are not going to do what we did, but come up with better solutions because you are the future leaders. The blood that was shed was for you guys. That means you have to take a stand no matter what, but in a responsible way. You know, freedom is very dangerous. You cannot do whatever you like, whenever you like. That means you have to stand for the right thing, but with responsibility. I always emphasize responsibility. Now that the paths are open, what are you doing? That's the main question. I realize that some of the youth, you know, to take a short left or right, they just do drugs, you know, like it's an easy way of dealing with problems. Problems will be here forever. All we have to do is to shake those problems by doing the right thing. Whatever problems we have, like drugs, teenage pregnancy, GBV, you should take the stand. We will follow at the back. We did that, so we are just actually supporting what you are doing. We are making sure that we are actually putting ourselves in your shoes so that you, in return, you can understand. This is a two-way street. You still need us, we still need you to be better leaders of tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mama Antoinette. I'm now going to hand over to the Deputy Chairperson of the Katrana Foundation, but also during the 80s, I'm also reading this book by Uncle Ismail Badi now, and there's the foreword that you've written, Dr. Mandla, and you write about the important work of grassroots activism. And I think that for me was just the most inspiring thing as the foundation tries to carry out that work. So I'll hand over to you now to deliver your message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks to Mam Stolle and the colleagues. Yeah, so we're talking about June 1976. There's a whole generation that comes through them. So in the 80s, we had to take on the struggle that was left by quite a lot of colleagues who went to prison, others died, others went to exile. But our determination was such that we were referred to as the Young Lions. And we have always been motivated by this idea of saying freedom in our lifetime. So that is who we were as such. And we had a vision of South Africa, which we'll talk about that later on. But our preoccupation was to get rid of apartheid and race-based policies that were not allowing South Africans to mingle together. But in essence, we were activists. We were not politicians. Our defining feature was more of service. Our ethics was more of solidarity, of empathy with the less privileged people. So there was quite a lot of unity that we came up there. So in that sense, that spirit must, in my view, should continue as it were. Whether in 27 years we've achieved freedom in our lifetime, maybe some have. But if you look at the issues that you are dealing with here, and the range of you're dealing with substantive issues, not politics in an official way, that I'm a politician, etc., etc. There are issues that, for instance, there is an equal education here, there is a corruption watch. There's quite a lot of organizations that are dealing with what I would call socio-economic rights in the Constitution. And that is the struggle of today, as it were. So going forward, my message is that this future belongs to you. It can't be crafted by myself and others who were there, 76, 80s, etc. If you don't take a stage, this future is going. So it means there's a lot that you've got to work. Firstly, not allowing the country to collapse, not allowing the country to go into flames, because it's your future as such. So in that sense, it's going to be important that you insist on accountability from people, leaders, politicians, etc. There must be accountability. And sure accountability is there. So the nice thing when I look at your theme here, firstly, it's parade. I'm not sure whether Ma'am Stoller, there was a parade in your time. In my time, there were not. We were in combat. We were fighting street by street, etc. But this idea of the parade is a very innovative concept. It's for young people as such. The idea of justice that you are putting is very profound because it's deep. It talks about fairness. It talks about dignity. It talks about umuntu mabantu. So I'm happy that you are taking the struggles to at a high level. But also in your theme, there's an issue of change. There's a lot that has happened in South Africa in the last 28 years. But we must identify those things that must change. We must identify those things that need to be renewed as such. So you have your own struggles, new forms of struggles, as it were, new institutional arrangements that you need to have, new modes of organizing. The way you are organizing, I can't compete with yourselves insofar as that is concerned. So let's not forget, in terms of participation, that everything and anything that we do at the center is the people, not myself, not one politician, etc. That we must go back to this idea of being lifelong. You can participate in political parties that must know that politics only in society as a whole. And I'm happy that this is all young people in different organizations, etc., not constrained by any ideological sense, but at the end of the day, it's being an activist. So continue to build that movement of activists that is going to be important for us. So with those few words, and representing myself, but also I think representing the sentiment of the Katrana Foundation, I wish you good luck in your organization, and I'm sure you're going to ignite quite new ideas in how we organize society as a whole. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tate Mandla. I think the words that you've shared with us spring deep because we see the difference in the politicians that want to do politics for personal gain and why the importance of young people really from the communities that we're coming from who are serving already, doing the phenomenal work, to almost look at how we build power in that way. And as you're mentioning, I think it's important to note that this initiative has been a non-partisan initiative. Members here come from and organizations represented obviously have people who form part of political parties across the board. But this is not something that is endorsed necessarily by a political party. However, we know politics is personal. Politics goes beyond just political parties. And therefore, as young people, we need to rise up to the occasion and be part of those who are counted on this value system that you speak of, from progressive activism, progressive values, who have a vision in mind of a South Africa that is not burning, that is not going up in flames, but one that is being built. And to do, Uncle Kathy says as well, is that it's easy to destroy, but it's hard to build. And that takes time and effort from all of us. With that in mind, I'd like to thank you, Mama Antoinette and Mr. Nkomfe, and you're welcome to stay for the program in the seats. I would like to call onto this side of the tables, the speakers from a Solidarity Messages, or Solidarity Organization, sorry, Corruption Watch, Voice of the People, the Climate Group's representative, Section 27, Equal Education, Defend Our Democracy, Fight Inequality Alliance. I must also indicate there were one or two other speakers who, unfortunately, due to urgent and emergency issues, could not make it. So the right to Protest representative, who is also a partner organization who has endorsed this, will be joining us in front. Please, can you come to the front? Thank you. We're going to have to move these things also. Ladies and gentlemen, aside from me mentioning the non-partisan nature of this, there's a seat next to me. I think it's important to note as to what the call out is also. While we said there's 76 organization endorsements, we're not ending there, because the call out we will be making on June 16th is that we want consistent action from us as a collective, which will end up taking place, hopefully, on a month-on-month basis. We will get to those details on June 16th, but for those organizations listening, for those groups in communities who are in different advocacy spaces, who resonate with the message that we're putting out today, this message of hope and change and justice, please feel free to contact us so that we can get your endorsement, but also your presence on the day would be valued, because we know your issues are intersectional with all the other issues that we're speaking of. To kick us off, I'd like to pass the mic to Mazwandile, who's a representative of Corruption Watch. Please pass this on.
Sure. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming today, and thank you very much once again to Umam Antoinette and Uba Mandla. We say to you that we take the baton. We take the baton, Ma'am Antoinette, mindful of the multiple challenges that are facing us as young people. We take the baton in light of South Africa being the most unequal country in the world. We take the baton in light of the continued gender-based violence and femicide that has plagued our country. We take the baton in light of climate issues that are facing our country, the issue of global warming that has ensured in our country, unfortunately, the effects of which have displaced hundreds of people, have taken hundreds of people's lives, and have also destroyed infrastructure in KZN. We take the baton, Ma'am Antoinette, under very harsh circumstances that we live in, where at the core of it lies the issue of corruption and the continued abuse of entrusted power that continue to undermine the gains of democracy, that continues to put a price tag in our future as young people. But like the generation of 1976, gathered here are individuals who would not allow that to happen. Gathered here today are individuals who would also ensure that we fight against this abuse of power wherever it raises its ugly head. But also, unfortunately, young people are beginning to be not only passive victims of corruption, they are beginning to be actively involved in corruption. So as young people, as we fight this corruption, we must continue to check ourselves and our behavior and to ensure that we are not part of this corruption that we would also like to fight. So as Corruption Watch, this is our message of solidarity to the June 16 parade. We would like to encourage young people to join us on the 16th of June in Pretoria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think to make it easier, can we just do it in this order so we don't have to pass the mic over and over? Okay. Onkle from the Right to Protest group, who's helped us in a lot of the logistics work for the planning of it. So I'll pass the mic to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Omhle from the Right to Protest project. We are based at the Center for Applied Legal Studies at CALS. And just the message of support today is really clear and simple for us. We're very happy, we were excited when Zaki and Ifran approached us about the youth parade. Because in Right to Protest, we truly do believe that youth participation in the political well-being of this country is very important, and it's imperative, not only for the current struggles that the youth is facing, unemployment, lack of access to education, opportunities, but even for ensuring a healthier society for those coming after us. But truly, what has really brought us to this space is, or to this current position which the youth finds itself in South Africa, is because we have a government that has really pushed us to the periphery as the youth. And the youth of this country deserve better. The youth of this country really deserves a government that invests not only in their talents, their abilities, in the things that can be productive in, but also really in their well-being as the youth of this country. I'd like to thank TMPD publicly for being so supportive of the youth parade, but I would really like to caution public order policing and ask them to do their job on their day, to steer away from arbitrary police violence that might take place on the day of the youth parade, and actually do their job well. So, and Right to Protest, we are against any type of arbitrary police violence, arbitrary violence that might also come from private security. We are really trusting for a day that is peaceful, a day in which our governments may not only hear our demands, but may be resolute in actually serving the youth the way that we should. We are truly behind this initiative. We are truly behind the struggle for equity for all youth of this nation, especially marginalized youth. And we look forward to future engagements with all youth protesters and activists as R2P. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omhle. I know her from the generation who was leading at WITS, and as student leaders, it's good to have many of them filter through into civil society and still contribute back. So thank you so much for being in support. To resonate with that message, as we said, this is the Youth Day Parade for Justice and Change in order to maintain that peaceful march and demonstration and that protest action that young people legitimately and rightfully have to raise their voices. So we are constitutionally mandated to do that, and we encourage even school-going children who want to, you heard Mom Antoinette say, sometimes without permission of parents. But even in this case, we'd like to call parents also to join in because they share the frustrations. So with that, I'm going to pass the mics to Dudu, who is representing the Defend Our Democracy campaign.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dudu, as Irfan has mentioned, and our message of support is as follows. So we understand that solving issues of young people in this country is intrinsic to the future of solving solving the issues around the decline of our democracy. And that part of the success of our democracy is fundamentally based on young people in particular being active citizens in this country. And so when we think about the success of this democracy and us as young people being intrinsic to it, then we need to be forthcoming around fighting issues of youth unemployment, the crisis of basic education, higher education, and many other issues around social ills, young people resolving to taking drugs, etc. And so when we think about these issues, it means that because we're the ones mostly affected by them, we're the ones that need to be forthcoming in resolving them. And if we don't urgently address these issues, which fundamentally are a threat to our democracy, then we then have issues of furthering youth unemployment, young people continuously being uneducated, young people continuously, not necessarily benefiting directly or not necessarily enjoying the fruits of democracy in the way that it is promised by our Constitution. We also must understand and we must fight against corruption because it directly steals from us benefiting from this democracy and the promises from our Constitution. And so when we think about perhaps a young person, a young student traveling to the Wits University to go and study, and then going back home to go and study in a candlelight, then we know that there's something wrong in this country. When, as a young person or an employed young person or someone who is seeking work, has to take 3 taxis to get to where job opportunities are, instead of taking 1 train, then we know that something's wrong. Then we know that we need to ask those who are supposed to provide us with services to live more meaningful lives are robbing us of something, and we need to ask for those things and ask for accountability. And in fact, not even ask anymore. I think we're at a point where we're demanding it because they're supposed to give it to us as per the promises of our Constitution. And so government must also come to the fore. If we're going to talk about a social compact, right, where we as citizens of this country, we as people of this country must demand accountability, then they must account as well, right? It is a two-way thing. And so we need government to prioritize youth issues, not tokenize them, but prioritize them. So we cannot have our government leaders want to prioritize a flag and not want to prioritize youth programs that are in dire need at the moment. And so this is also central to us, engaging in this concept of a participatory democracy. And this is why we need more young people involved in the process of democratic change and renewal. And I just want to leave with this, that we need to be very central in this process of participatory democracy. And we must show up as young people at national, provincial, and local government. So we must, engage with our constituency officers, engage in processes of petitioning government, participate in legislative processes, because that is the way in which we can perhaps see some meaningful change in our country. And so, again, feeding into the message of change, justice, etc., we must also think about continuously shifting our politics to one that is no longer toxic, to one that is no longer self-serving, and to one that is people-centered. And when we think, more inclusively of a people-centered politics, to one that really addresses youth-related issues, because we are a majority in this country. So when we think about these issues, these really tie well to some of the messaging that not only the Ahmed Katrana and other organizations represented here need to think about, but that we need to think about, drastic change for this country, particularly because there are instances of instability and instances of destabilization in this country which require political change and renewal. The Defend Our Democracy campaign, along with the Katrana Foundation and all other organizations and other sectors of society, is building up towards a conference for democratic renewal and change, which will take place in July. And in this process and in this build-up, we will be having massive community dialogues to really try and reignite participatory democracy at a grassroots level, but also to try and facilitate conversations around why there is need for democratic renewal and change in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Yes, this democratic project is 27 years old, but there's a long way to go, and I think each of us have that role to play. We see young people at the ballot box not wanting to participate at the ballot box, rather, and that's as a result of just this distrust in the systems, in the political parties that we have. And I think this must be a call out to them to say, we need change. We need a democratic project that allows and creates hope for young people to support. And that really must filter through in the elections to come. I'm going to pass the mic now to the young grade 11 student, Otsile, who represents some of the climate groups who are on board with this June 16th parade. Otsile, over to you. Just give me a second to shift.
This is wrong. I should be at school right now, preparing for my exam, which I'll be writing tomorrow. But because governments and our leaders have failed to take adequate measures to protect my generation and all of you from the climate crisis, I am forced to be here. People often mischaracterize what the climate crisis is about. The climate crisis, and as well as all the issues that have been talked about so far, are all intersectional. They all link to one another. And so while I'm here, and while I'm talking about the need for climate action, which 7 other organizations have signed up to be part of this youth parade to also call for, note, the climate crisis also relates to issues like healthcare, like economic development, like ensuring equal access to resources. The government needs to prioritize climate action because we have just about 8 years left, if I'm still correct, 8 years left to prevent the world from reaching the 1.5 degree Celsius mark. What does that mean? That is the point at which the world reaches devastation. And I mean our climate collapses, we are unable to protect ourselves from climate change, and we watch devastating environmental events start to occur. You've heard about KZN, the devastating floods that took place there. That is an example of what we call an extreme weather event. Now, these extreme weather events are going to become more and more prevalent. Day Zero is a great example of another extreme weather event. These extreme weather events do not have bias. They happen everywhere in the world. And for our government to continue to follow this short-sighted idea of continuing to invest in fossil fuel projects for short-term gains is irresponsible. It is laughable if it was not dangerous. My generation, as well as all the other young people who are part of this panel, who are part of this youth parade, are demanding immediate climate justice, immediate climate action. We're talking about climate mitigation and adaptation. We're talking about investment in sustainable projects, green projects that see us moving away from fossil fuels and other greenhouse gas emitting forms of energy. We have an electrical crisis in this country. We can invest in sustainable energy, which will give us long-term electrical security whilst helping us to meet our goals as were set in the Paris Climate Accord. I am wearing a lapel pin here, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, the world's to-do list by 2030. It embodies all of the issues you're going to hear about in this panel, as well as climate justice. Because if we are going to build a perfect society, then someone who's in grade 11 should not have to be so scared for his future that he's forced to leave school, come here, and have to tell the adults in the room to wake up and do something. Because it is irresponsible of them to continue to perpetuate a crisis that puts billions of people's billion people's lives at stake. I'm getting a bit fired up here, if you can't tell. But folks, please, we need you out there. They need to get the message that we're demanding immediate action, not just on climate, on healthcare, on economic justice. We are defending the very principles of democracy, that allow me to get up here and call out our leaders, call out our Environment Minister, Barbara Creasy, call out DMRE Minister, Kwete Mantashe, two irresponsible people who are playing with the lives of not South African children, but billions of children across the world, because unless we all do something about the climate crisis, I can't even describe the level of devastation that we will see. Scientists have been sounding the alarm for decades, and it is irresponsible of our leaders to continue to do nothing. So I'm here, I'm calling for every single young person, every single citizen in this country to please, on the 16th of June, you see the posters here, join us. If you believe that it is a right, of anyone in this country to breathe in fresh air that is not toxic and not harmful to them, join us. If you believe clean water is a right and should not be a privilege for a few wealthy people who'll be able to afford it when this crisis hits, join us. If you believe healthcare is a right for every citizen and we should not be condemning people in the most devastating circumstances already in this country to live in an even worse environment, join us. We're here, we're asking for your help, and we're not leaving until we get it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Young Lion. As you can see, I mean, everyone in the last few weeks, you've been affected by the energy crisis in this country, of Eskom's failure to deliver. It affects every household. Every person needs electricity in order to keep warm or cook food, etc., etc. And that's part of this issue, is that we need accountability from those in government and all the institutions, but equally so, those in the private sector who allow it to happen and who continue to put people's lives over, put profit over people's lives. And I think that needs to change drastically. I'm now going to hand over to Lawrence from Eco Education for your message of support.
Thank you very much. My name is Lawrence Manaka, and I am the newly elected Deputy Chairperson of Equal Education, and today we're going to be giving our message of support to this youth parade that is going to be taking place on the 16th, and we're also going to be inviting the youth to come join us. We're saying that as a grassroots movement, we see the disparity between the narrative of progress, which is a facade that the Department of Basic Education and as well as our politicians are painting out there. We're saying that what they're giving us is basically what we're not seeing basically on the ground. So what they're saying is actually happening is what our members on a daily basis are not facing. We are here to call on the government and particularly those who are leading us to say that the right to basic education and the right to education in general is immediate, as Section 29 guarantees that. And we are asking them that they must ensure that they provide just an equitable education now, not tomorrow, but now. We are saying that as equal education, the government must not use a lack of resources excuse as to why they are not providing proper education, as to why we still have mud schools in the deeper rural areas of the Eastern Cape, as to why we have the cases of Michael Komape and Nunkam Mtetwa dying in pit latrines. We are saying that the government must not give us any reason, but they must just act on the promise that is guaranteed by Section 29. We're saying that even though the Constitution says that the basic education is a right that everyone has, today we see a lot. We find that we still have learners who are learning in overcrowded classes, and that means that our teachers cannot perform very well. It means that our learners in those classes also cannot work very well. We still find that even though it is illegal right now in this country because of the norms and standards, we find that there are still schools that are made out of asbestos. And as Equal Education, we're saying that the government must act towards changing that. The Department of Basic Education has itself said that in order to change the socio-economic status of this country, we need to ensure that the communities that are underprivileged to know how to read, and that means that we need to increase the literacy rate. But we find it very staggering and very frightening when a study that was conducted in 2016 says that more than, when it says that 75% of our grade 4s across this country cannot read for meaning in all these languages, and it says that it is only in 2098, which is 80 plus years, that we're going to reach a literacy rate of 95%. That is very frightening for a country that says that we want to change the socio-economic status. We are calling upon all organizations to come and support this movement that is going to be happening on the 16th. We're saying that the contribution of the Department of Basic Education to social wage is significant, and because of that, we're also calling upon the government to try and change the social state holistically. The government must do a lot broadly to ensure that distributive and radical measures are taken to fight against employment, poverty, as well as inequality. With all of that being said, we're saying that we stand firmly behind the efforts of Ahmed Katrana Foundation, as well as other movements that are here today. And we're saying that we invite so many people to come and march with us so that we can change education in this country, we can change social climate, and we can change just a lot more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So thanks for your solidarity message. Open Dialogue, who isn't with us currently, but who signed on as an endorser, had done a survey with many other, with Youth Capital, with a number of young people who signed the survey, basically understanding what are the costs for looking for a job. 84% choose eating over job seeking. 70% of young people borrow money for job seeking. On average, 938 rand a month is what people use to look for work. So what does this tell us on the crazy, unsustainable economic climate we are in? It cannot go on. Young people should not be putting food aside in order for them to find a job. And the costs continue to grow. We know that it's going to continue to grow as fuel and other prices increase. So here with us today to deliver a message from the Fight Inequality Alliance is Mahale from the Fight Inequality Alliance. Please pass the mics towards her. And yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Irfan. Good afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to thank the youth leadership at Katrana Foundation for convening all of us for June 16. For reminding us of who we are and what collective power we have. When we talk about youth unemployment, usually the driving narrative is the statistics and the graphics. That is important. But on June 16, you get to see that these are not just numbers. These are the realities of millions of young people in this country. We have an economy today in which exclusion is at the core of how it works. The forefathers of apartheid put it there in the beginning, and it was intentional. It is not by mistake or laziness that so many of us today are unemployed. The unemployment crisis is a manifestation of the historical policies that are leaving all of us in poverty. The Fight Inequality Alliance stands in solidarity with the youth of South Africa, not just in South Africa, but the Fight Inequality Alliance in Mexico, in Kenya, in India, all of us. And this is why we're coming together to say that government needs to change this policy. Andre Lord says that the master's key cannot undo the master's house. So we need economic policies that are going to be inclusive and that are going to be co-created with young people in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call on now Fraser Locke, who immediately when we sent this email there was a response, because I know Fraser has been part of the last few years and just recently had this idea form of community-based action work for Voice of the People was born.
Thank you, Irfan. Ladies and gentlemen, the press, future change makers. My name is Faiza Locke. I'm so happy to see so many people who want to make a difference in their community. As we heard, there have been and still are so many challenges ahead of us. Our collective failure to meet these challenges year after year, decade after decade, has led us to this breaking point. Our frustrations are heightened by years of unfulfilled promises by our government, which led us to not only not trust our politicians, but also not trust each other, further destroying our fragile country. And what scares me the most is that we have become so heartbroken by our democracy that we don't believe in it anymore.
Yeah.
Have a look at our voting turnout. Thanks. Our democracy only exists in our imaginations. Yet in spite of our broken democracy, I stand here today grateful for the diversity of my heritage. I stand here knowing that my story is just part of a larger South African story.
Yeah.
That I owe a debt to all those who came before me. We didn't come here to fear the future. We came here to shape it. And the South Africa we must create, and in doing so, remember that it's always darkest before dawn.
Yeah.
And that's what today is about. Not new dawns, not false dawns, but the awakening of those asleep as dawn breaks to reclaim our beloved land. We, Voice of the People movement, have just launched our community program, the Community Enhancement Program. And this program was born out of the idea that in order for us to create the world we want to see, we need to build stronger communities. And we do that by enhancing the way we connect and relate with each other in the truest sense of Ubuntu. And I'm here to share 3 learnings through my time in community grassroots organizing. Number 1, all of us share common inspirations. We all want the same things. We all want to live in peace and have security. We all want to be educated. We all want to work with dignity. We all want to love our families and our communities. We should not be distracted by our differences. Rather celebrate our commonalities.
Yeah.
That should be the driving force behind our collective vision. Number 2, the future we want to create requires us to use our imagination and be open to learn, unlearn, and relearn, like unlearning unconscious bias and learning to transition from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Because when we do that, we're always growing and developing as a person. Because when you develop, our communities grow. And lastly, change is always possible when people feel that they are involved and listened to. Our nation is not too late to heal. Our nation is not too late to reimagine our community, not too late to grow out of our downfalls and rise above it. And it's not just about being positive and only seeing the good. Being positive is about committing to the good we see. The people in this room, the stories of everyday South Africans are testaments to it. We do not have to fight this battle alone. We have all these amazing people in this room and in South Africa fighting every single day to create a future that we can all look forward to. Our problems must be dealt through partnerships, and our progress must be shared. Let's continue to commit ourselves to the future we want to create. And the words of Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Lastly is Comrade Mateo Brody. I call him Comrade because he was really a activists, but also on behalf of Section 27, their message of solidarity.
Thank you. I think just to start off by, again, thanking the Katrana Youth Activism Program for organizing all of us and bringing us all together for this important action. As Section 27, we stand in support with the Katrana Youth Activism Program and all the organizations that have come together as we make this call for a socially just South Africa, and as we march towards the union buildings in Pretoria demanding this. We recognize that the freedoms we enjoy came at a very high price, and we appreciate the sacrifices that have been made for us to get to this point. However, in 2022, when we were faced with the high levels of inequality, unemployment, a broken education system, which my brother Lawrence has spoken about, a broken education system, a broken healthcare system, and amongst a host of other unrealized socioeconomic rights, we have no option but to simply pick up the baton. And you know, often when people speak about the youth in this country, words like apathetic, words like uninterested are used to describe us. But I think this action demonstrates that this isn't the case. The youth of this country are frustrated, and what this action shows is that we are not just armchair critics. We're mobilizing and we're organizing and presenting very clear demands with very clear solutions that we're proposing. And so, you know, as Section 27, we stand in solidarity with the Katrana Youth Activism Program and all the organizations involved, particularly as we make the demand for a non-sexist, non-racist, equal society that affords human dignity to everyone. And we echo the call for all youth to join us on June 16 at the Union buildings. Thank you.
You know, I'm glad you ended off and you mentioned something to this effect around where young people and the perception from public of them being, of us being apathetic and lazy and so on, and involved in these, you know, social issues. I think Mama Antoinette also mentioned things like drugs and so on. But here we are today. Look at this panel next to me. Leaders who I would walk behind, run behind and fight for at any point in my life, because they want a better South Africa for all of us. These are young leaders. Everyone here is under 35, wanting a better life for South Africa, wanting a South Africa that works for everyone, and that serves on its mandate to alleviate these big issues. I think Tessa Dooms writes a few weeks back, are we ready to vote for a 25-year-old president in South Africa?
Yes.
If your instinct is no, before knowing anything about this person other than their age, is it worth asking what inherent biases we hold and presuppositions we make about young people? Age should not be a factor when choosing a leader, but skills and ability. And I think we're rewriting that script today to say there are young people who are leading, not just us here. Remember, we're just a snippet of a broader coalition of youth and members of the media. There are snippets and a page that has all those who've signed on, and the many more that we hope to bring on board as well. Because this, as you can see, is building up to an inclusive space where all youth groups who find and resonate with this message, with these values, can come forward and join in this movement that will be there on June 16th at the Union buildings. I'm going to take this next few minutes now, or rather before that, let me just say this call. The call we made really, and you see it on the posters, is one that government and those in positions of power to effectively, one, combat youth unemployment, gender-based violence, climate change, and crime. Two, put an end to all forms of racism, discrimination, and corruption. Number three, create sustainable and meaningful job opportunities, safe environments for learning and development. And four, provide free and quality education, healthcare, and service delivery. Those are some of the things that we've put forward as the rallying call for us to work towards. I'm going to take this time now for any questions, comments, anything from the floor before we close the session. Hands, and if it's directed at any specific person also, you can just inform us. Cool. You have to, then we can't hear you.
Hello, can everybody hear me clearly? Because I'm not going to say anything else. Hi. So my name is Suchilitso, and I'm a freelance independent journalist. My question is for anybody in the panel who's just willing to take it on. So the march is going to happen in June, and will there be a memorandum handed over to anybody who will be there present? And from there, what kind of accountability measures will you make sure that will happen from the side of the coalition going there, making sure that government sticks to the memorandum and the promises that they will obviously say to the people who are representing the coalition. The second question that I have is not to the panel, but I don't know if the deputy of the foundation is still here. But my question is mainly to the elders in the room who have been in the same places where the decision-making processes have happened. What is the response to the Youth Day Parade from those who are elders? Are they willing to come to the fore and engage in a meaningful way, in a way that has been spoken about, or are they still going to carry on in the levels of tokenism that have been happening in these past couple of years? And what is the foundation, the Parents Foundation, the Ahmed Foundation, in order to uphold accountability, not only from society, but from government as a whole, to make sure that we are protected as young people? Thank you.
Okay. So a lot of the discussion we had firstly internally and in our meetings with the other coalition partners was what happens June 17th. And the call out we want to be making on that day is to use the memorandum's ideas, use the memorandum's calls to start rallying around a solidarity action plan, meaning that month on month, what actions and what kinds of events that are we going to be doing in order for us to build and answer some of those questions and respond not only by holding government to account for the memo, but also from ourselves and what are we going to do to act and keep that pressure building. Number two, on that same point, is that in this process of reaching out to all organizations, there's been organizations from rural parts of this country, from urban centers that are not in Gauteng, for example, that can't make it to the parade, but want to. Unfortunately, because it's expensive, this exercise is expensive, we have to extend that solidarity through communication only and hope that post this event, post the June 16th Parade for Justice and Change, that we can build that solidarity across the country with youth formations in doing all sorts of work and reaching out specifically to those ones that have already communicated with us, but those that are still to come on board. From the question around the elders, I can say from some of the older activists I know that they've been very supportive. Supportive enough to say, we've been through this, we want to support in different ways, and they've been, sharing this, messages of support. But I think what we'd really appreciate is sustainable support, substantial support. So using their influence to say, you know what, I'm going to challenge my own bias. These are young people today. These are leaders. I'm ready and willing to support them. And not just, and I mentioned it earlier, but make financial contributions towards this kind of work. Make financial contributions towards things like water, things like buses, things like printing of pamphlets and so on. But beyond that, there's organizations that are doing the grassroots work, civic education. I wish I had enough budget to run this around the country. going to communities, create the spaces, like Faiza said, where you create community and train and teach young people more about civic and human rights education. But that's where we need that kind of funds. And they need to be able to put that solidarity in more practical forms like that. Others, I think we have informed government, so on the day we will be handing over that memorandum to the presidency. At least we're 2 weeks away, so we will obviously keep updating as if the program changes and so on. As Antle said, Tshwane Metro, we have informed them and will be engaging them further, and we hope that they will maintain their duty on the day and not, as we've seen in the past, carry out unconstitutional acts and violent acts against young people. And really, this is why we call this a June 16th parade for justice and change, because we want the public, parents alike, teachers, everyone to come on board in this and rally behind this kind of thing. I hope that answers you. Sure. Does anyone else want to comment?
Okay. Yeah, so I think your question also touches on this solidarity that you are seeing here. It also challenges the solidarity to say, firstly, how do we maintain this solidarity and how do we continuously support each other's initiatives? Because these are very important initiatives, and us working in silos sometimes doesn't give us the necessary desired result that we might be looking for. I mean, for instance, if we do not support equal education in its work, the impact of it is quite dire, because we'll continue to see the dilapidated infrastructure in schools. We'll continue to see schools not being provided with learner-assisted material, no textbooks even today. We'll continue to see these mart schools continuing. And this has greater impacts because this touches exactly on the high dropout rate that we are beginning to see. With those young people who are out of school, will then have no other option but to go into the lives of crime. That affects our entire system as a country. So this solidarity is very important. I think the next thing now is to maintain it and to ensure that we continuously support it.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Anne from Kingston. You mentioned that after you guys hand over the memorandum, the solidarity program is going to commence. If you can perhaps elaborate what that's going to look like, what's going to happen exactly.
She's saying she's going to have the whole thing, like after the solidarity programs. What's next?
Hi everyone, my name is Salailo. I'm with Salam Media. So I just quickly find out what were the vetting process in choosing which organizations make up a part of the parade, because there's a lot of organizations. Was there a vetting process, or did consciously people come through and join once you got the word out there? That's one. Number two, what would you guys consider as a success after the parade? And number three, what would be a response if any of the political parties or various student commands, alliance political parties decide also want to get involved? Is that something would you guys also consider? Thank you.
Anyone wants to respond? Sure.
Okay. I think for me, what will be a success to me, I think it will be clear time frames on when they're going to be addressing some of the issues that we are highlighting here that we think are very urgent. And I think a success will also say what does accountability actually look like, from the part of the government, and what are the measures that they're going to be taking basically to ensure that we have everything that we're asking here for. Yeah, that's just about it.
I will answer the question related to political parties. I think when building solidarity, successful solidarity building is understanding what our common ground is and connecting from that point. So whatever our struggles are, whether we are civil society, political parties, must form, an anchoring point through which we can find common ground, right? And so I think we need to be open-minded around, building solidarity with political parties, particularly ones that do not want to almost like take over or tokenize or, use this as a space to further a political agenda, but to further an idea, to further a struggle. And I think from that entry point, all of us here would probably be keen on collaborating with political parties. But if political parties aren't, do not necessarily represent the kind of values we represent, do not kind of want to work together, but have other agendas, then unfortunately we can't. I think we need to be honest around where we are as a country. Part of the problems is a political party problem, a toxic political culture fundamentally led by political parties. And so perhaps, there needs to be a bit of, we need to be circumspect about how we engage with them. But are we open to engaging with political parties? Definitely. Our country is led by, a multi-party democratic system, meaning that fundamentally when we all go and vote here, we are voting for a political party. And so perhaps we need to have them here, but how we have them here and how they engage with us and reciprocate is equally important.
Thanks for that, Dudu. I'd also like to add on, there have been one or two who've requested from us, can they support? The reason why we maintain this non-partisan nature is as Dudu explained. So it's not like we will exclude them. Young people legitimately and rightfully we want to encourage political participation. We need them to be involved in that. But we need to also let them know that there's a broader grouping and youth in this country who aren't necessarily aligned and who want to see that culture changing. And that's something that we're putting out there. And if they support that, they're welcome to come there and support that call. But that's a thing that they need to discuss with themselves on whether they will be there. During the Fees Must Fall movement, there were similar questions. And you saw at times they said, no political regalia must be there. Other times they were like, no, because we legitimately represent these political parties. So as Dudu said, in that movement building work, in this kind of coalition solidarity work, we want to ensure that political parties know that this is also a means to hold them account, but also work with them to achieve greater justice and change within the system. The process of vetting, we put the call out to everyone. I mean, we, over the last 3 years of this youth program being in operation outside of the predecessor leadership program, we have a database of organizations we've worked with. We did send out this to a broad range of people we found on social media. As a result of word spreading, others got word of it and said, look, we want to support this, and they came through. And if they agree to this kind of values that we stand for, then they're welcome to come on board. And as I said, the call out again is if you still feel like that's something you want to be part of, you're welcome to still join in. The 76 mark is still in brackets and counting because we expect more to join as well. What's next? What's next? So between now and June 16th, we will be building up the solidarity work, doing a lot of the fundraising work, the mobilizing work. There are a lot of young people who want to attend from the Katrana youth clubs, from the organizations. I think a lot of that now will be dependent on whether we get the support for buses and other kinds of logistics, and we're also appealing to the public to support. There is a back a buddy online kind of mechanism. So if people want to make small donations, we welcome that as well, because in building solidarity, we know that a 20 Rand is as equal to a 200 Rand, because we know that that comes from a place of love and of solidarity. So on June 16th, this program will unfold. On June 17th and going forward, we will, as a coalition, look at supporting one another's initiatives, and hopefully thereafter maintain building on this work so that, one, we ask government consistently on the responses to the memorandum, but come next year, June 16th, assess where we've come as a collective as well, to see has there been any shifts in this kind of work, in the way we envision this to be. I hope that answers it.
Yes, I have one more question. So the disability community, will there be any sign language interpreters on the day of the parade? Will be interpreting for the deaf community, and what other provisions will be made for the disabled community who want to come on the Youth Day parade in order to support the program? Thank you.
Hi, I'm David from Daily Message. I think my question is not asked, but I just to what extent are you willing to work with the political organizations and other radical organizations such as Operation Tupula?
So TMPD, because we're going to Pretoria, they will be managing the logistics for us as well when it comes to our surroundings, environment and safety, and they are obliged by the law to actually provide officers that can communicate to members of the disability community, and I'm sure they will also be providing other parking ways or routes for members of the disability community as well. I just want to reiterate again that government actually has 14 days to respond to the memorandum. I think the coalition first is going to start by just waiting for the response, but we don't want an acknowledgement of just the memorandum. We want a clear plan of what is it and who is going to be responsible for the demands that are going to be on the memorandum.
So that we can hold people accountable.
That's right.
Thank you for that. We do know some of the organizations who are on board are from, do a lot of work with the disability, members of the disability community. Is that the right way of framing it? And I think provisions would be on a volunteer basis as a result of the fact that we don't have the kind of mass budgets that big institutions would have. This is civil society. Often we're functioning off very little and doing a whole lot from that very little. So we're very resourceful in that manner, but we will be calling out to people to support us in that regard, especially around sign language and things like that. To answer the question around Operation Dudula, if you look at the coalition members, there are lots of members who've called them out for being xenophobic. And I don't think that they would resonate with the kind of messages we're putting out. But that's something I could be challenged on, perhaps even by my own members of the coalition. If they're willing to work around an anti-xenophobic, we can look at those things, because that's one who builds solidarity. But it has to be based on values that are shared and so on. Sure. There was a question here.
Hi, my name is Nokwazi, I'm from Wife. So, out from you, how can, and not just on a surface level, but actively participate as you have. And I don't know if my question is on lyrics, houses of media also make sure that when they are learning for them to want to actively learn more and bring about change within the topic of climate change. Because we'd be ignorant to not say that, like you say, the time is now, change to happen and all of that.
so much. Through you, Chair, I would like to greet everyone who's present. And I'd like to state that I think my first question was covered there because I was going to ask about the disability sector, because we don't want to be seen as people doing things for the youth but also excluding a part of youth, because we wouldn't be different from those whom we are calling failures today. And then secondly, I want to know that the memorandum, is it a pre-generated thing that you've already set and discussed and concluded on it, or we can have something like a plenary of the memorandum? Because I believe that everything that will be on the memorandum is something that we've submitted before in our sectors or in our organizations, as we are organizations that deal with a lot of different things. So if we were to have a plenary together, whereby we say, let's write that memorandum, because we don't want to also get there and find out that in the memorandum, there is something that they can actually, the youth, that can actually fight us about to say, but why did you exclude us? And one of the things that we should also remember is that when we are taking stand, when we are doing a call for action, we are saying we applaud what is good, like the government just made the sign language and official language. We applaud them for that. But then we are also identifying things that are lacking from things that have been previously submitted. So I think it will be important through you, Chair, to have that plenary towards making the memorandum, so that on the day of submission, everyone and everything is covered. Because when we go out of here, Chairperson, we're still going to go and reach out to other organizations. Even I myself, I'm Caesar from Show Me Your Number. I got this information at the 11th hour, so I couldn't populate it with other youth that I know that they are active in fighting for youth. So I'm still going to go outside and speak with other youth, and then I'm sure they would love to be part of this initiative, and they would love to actually populate this information to their networks. So I think we still need that platform, Chairperson, whereby we will dedicate maybe a day and say we are sitting and then we are discussing everything, so that once we say we are submitting what we are submitting, we ensure that everyone has been given a chance to state everything that they need. Secondly, I would also like to have a vaccination site there for those who would like to vaccinate, of which is one of the services that I also provide on the side. So hence why I'm saying we still need that plenary meeting, Chairperson, but through you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer first?
I think yours first. That was this one first.
Okay, finally we're talking about climate change. So to answer the first aspect of that question, making it easier for young people to join the climate justice movement is very hard. By the way, there's an organization called the Climate Justice Movement, so note, I'm talking about the broader movement as it stands. For me personally, how I got involved, I attended a Modern United Nations Summit conference thing that was happening. I do debating at school, hence why I'm very adept to these issues. And there was a professor who talked about the actual problem that is climate change, the issues we're going to face, what the level of devastation is going to be, and that sparked my interest. Now, I understand that's not everyone, but to get someone engaged with climate change, the first thing that needs to happen is literally how I opened. We need to talk about it, and we need to not just talk about it for like 5-minute segments in the 6 o'clock news. We need to actually have long-term discussions, have experts, and have it in a way that is digestible for young people to actually understand what it's about. There are a lot of terms when you talk about climate change that are very hard to understand. I mean, who here knows what climate adaptation is? Hands up. I'm putting you on the spot. See, not a lot of people understand what these big fancy terms mean. But when I say climate adaptation is how basically we are going to adapt to the climate crisis when it eventually hits, we need this kind of breakdown of what these complex issues are. And I had the opportunity to raise this in 2019. I was part of I forget what it's called. It was a dialogue with the Minister of Environment, Barbara Creasy, and I raised the very same issue that you said. How do we make this more digestible for young people? How do we make them more engaged? Like, it's not talked about in school. The fact that I found out about it outside of school is very perplexing to me. It is just infuriating because there are a lot of young people in this country who do not know about this crisis that is unfolding. And if they did know, they would be as mad as I am, and they would also be here. So that answers the first aspect. The second aspect is, how do you get involved? I am part of 2 organizations at the moment. The first one, Fridays for Future South Africa. We have a banner right there. In case you can't read it, it's the one that says, "Liar, liar, Earth is on fire." That is a message that we are sending. Fridays for Future South Africa, as some of you might know, is an organization that was started by Greta Thunberg, the now 19-year-old climate activist from Sweden. These movements are driven primarily by young people. And so if there's any young person out there who wants to get involved, join Fridays for Future South Africa. We have lots of space. We have boundless space. I can guarantee if every single if every single young person in this country joined, we would not even be at the limit that we were expecting. We are also open in organizations like Extinction Rebellion, an organization I represent as well. We have lots of space for people to join. Look us up. We're on social media. We're on Google, we're on Facebook, if there are any teenagers that still have Facebook. We have lots of space for you to join, and we would really encourage a lot of young people to join, and we'd really encourage the discussion, not just in schools, but in households, about climate change. There are parents who don't know about climate change, which is, scary, because we as young people are expected to live a life where we think that we're safe from all the world's challenges because there's an adult somewhere in a room that is making a decision in our interest. But if a lot of adults don't actually know about the most pressing issue to us now, it is very hard for us to rest easy. And so hence why there is an inherent need for young people to stand up, to take action, hence why I am here, hence why I think if more teenagers my age knew what was happening, they'd also be here. And I encourage, platforms like this summit, this parade that's happening on June 16th. This is an opportunity for us to reach people and to spread the message. And I am really looking forward to what that means. I hope I answered your question. This is my first time doing anything like this. So if it's not good, please forgive me.
No, trust me, you're very good. To answer the question, I know we are running out of time, so I'll be very sharp and brief. The memorandum process, it is unfolding, so there's different task teams that we've put in place. One of them is the memo task team, and for those who want to join in, that is available. I think there will be engagements on that going into next week and even up until the day where we hand this over. We did get confirmation just now from the presidency that somebody will be there to collect it. Vaccination site, I think that's a great idea. I know your colleague there has indicated to me that that is a possibility, and we want to encourage people to be safe. We are in the time of COVID as well, so please make sure you do that. That's a great idea. We're happy that is something you want to bring forward. I don't think there are any questions. One there, and then this is the last. So anyone, no inspired hands? Great. Okay, 2.
Media question. Partners will engage with
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Obvious and I am from Gays and Lesbians Memorial Trust, Gala, but specifically speaking to the Gala Youth Forum. So we recently had a parade in Brown and very successful, but to get to a point where we actually had to have it, the challenges are unimaginable. My question is, I've looked at the list of coalitions, like who are part of the parade, and I didn't happen to see anyone who's or like a queer organization